tell more about yourselves if you would like. And Jay is going to try to tape this so that we'll ideally have some of it to share later. Thanks.
Super. And then before I forget though, we were just, someone was asking how this area was prepped, and wanted to point out that it was actually just covered with landscape fabric for, I think, Jess and Angie got that fabric out in like August, the planter fabric. And it was not super well prepped, it was just sort of like leftover.
Yeah, you tilled first.
Yeah, it had been disked and there was some regrowth, maybe a little less vigorous than what you see right there.
Yeah. So that's sort of what we started. We put the landscape fabric on, so it was pretty effective, just kind of getting us to zero. So
And also thank you to Allie for her grant to provide for that. We're hoping to reuse it on another farm.
Yeah.
And that just is, I want to give a plug, so our next big workshop will be in March. Well, not counting the agroforestry, which can be a whole other thing on this grant. But our next big hedgerows opportunity will be on a very different kind of site in mid-March at Oyster Bay Farm, where they have standing water in the winter, totally different kind of planting. But then after that, we're going right up the road that way, Piece by Piece Farm. We're hoping to do a site prep workshop with them in the spring, where we might, and we'll do some webinars around solarization and occultation, and then do a hands-on workshop, and then a fall planting for them next fall. So hope to see you again. With that, sorry to interrupt.
No worries. Good. Yeah, and for all I wanted to sort of say was that we put together a sheet with the packet that has a few farms highlighted, mostly in California, because a lot of the hedgerow work has been going on in California. But there is one block of YouTube videos that you can go and look and see what Jean-Martin Fortier is doing with hedgerows on his farm in Canada. They're kind of experimenting with this idea of these narrow hedgerows in the field for pollinators and beneficials. So I just kind of collected a few resources for you to go and explore and see what other farms are doing, and then a list of studies that you know, if you want to nerd out and kind of read about, well, what are these actually doing in the field, and what do we know about them in terms of their effectiveness with pollinators and beneficials. So that sheet's there. You can cuddle up with some cocoa and you know, look through those. And then I think the other thing that I wanted to highlight was just that there's so much good funding out there now to put in these hedgerows. Just want to highlight especially NRCS. I think some of our NRCS to the left of it. Yeah, so raise your hands high. So at Pierce, we have been doing, they have a new practice called wildlife planting, which has an excellent reimbursement rate per plant. So you can, if you make a contract with NRCS, it's very doable because it's expensive to do this. And so I just want to highlight that there's really good funding out there to do this. So take advantage of that. And then of course your conservation districts, we also have maybe not as big a pot of funding, but it's the same funding. So reach out to us or your NRCS before you spend all your own money on plants. So this is a hedgerow manual, and for the WSG's put together. And then for our SARE grant, of course you're going to be familiar with the one template that we have that we're working on today, but we also will be putting out one that is all natives but for wetter soil. And then we're also working on one for the flower farmer, meaning that it'll be a template that sort of has plants chosen that would also be ones that could be used for bouquets and you know, serve a dual purpose. And then our final one we're working on is the one that you can harvest from. So it's going to be something that will be also dual purpose. So we'll be getting those out by the end of next year. So we'll probably link to them from the hedgerow manual site and the conservation districts. But just so you kind of know that those are coming, and we're excited about those. We've been working together with a group of farmers and Corin, including Helsing Junction farmers, we've been getting together periodically and just kind of brainstorming and really wanting them to be farm proofed and something that farmers have some input in, just highlighting anything that would be a red flag or something that wouldn't work on a farm. So that's the idea with those templates. So they're coming into 2024.
And we're hoping that all the materials you produce will have kind of like a special SARE, you know, your SARE grant, your partnership page link from ours so that people can be like, and these are some different styles.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, ours are kind of going to be designed to be a little bit more narrow. That's sort of the focus, just that you can kind of, if you want to go that route of inserting them between your production areas, or so. That's all I have to say. Thanks again.
Next year, but we're doing plant kit grants. Basically, I think it would probably be a hedgerow kit. And right now we're doing that down in Willamette Valley, but it's not certain yet, but we may be expanding our program up to Western Washington as well, and looking at conserving some important bumblebees as well in Eastern Oregon. Eastern Washington. So just keep that in mind. Check out the Xerces website and search for habitat kits, and that'll bring you right to Xerces habitat kits. So that's another option for folks in the near future. I'm with Xerces Society, and I'm also a partner biologist with the NRCS, so I work with NRCS planters and those folks out here. Give me a call if you need any help with any pollinator planting, and I know I've worked with some of you before. That's my position. The Xerces Society, if you guys haven't heard of it before, it is a national invertebrate conservation organization. We're based in Portland, but we have people all over the States, and now in Canada as well. We were founded, I don't remember the exact date, back in the 70s, and were named after the Xerces blue butterfly, which was a species of butterfly that used to occur in the dunes along the San Francisco Bay coastline, and with all that development and everything there, that butterfly has gone extinct, and so we use it as kind of it gives us energy to make sure that doesn't happen again with any other invertebrates, and so we do work on insects, but we also do work on other invertebrates. We have a whole program looking at freshwater mussel conservation here in the Pacific Northwest. So it's pretty interesting if you want more info on that. I don't know a whole lot about it, but we've got a lot of research and work on that. It is super important for keeping our streams clean and filtering out toxins. And so we want to make sure people are aware of those in our streams. But my main work is with insect conservation, especially insect conservation on farms. And so I work with farmers to help plant hedgerows like this and other habitat for both pollinators and beneficial insects, things that help farmers produce good food for everyone. I guess I'm going to kind of go through quickly some of the things. I know a lot of you guys probably already know some of the important things that hedgerows can, how they can benefit our pollinators and beneficial insects, but I'll just kind of go briefly through some of the important reasons why these hedgerows are designed the way they are, what plants are included. Pollinators and a lot of our predators and parasitoid insects that control pests on farms, they all need floral resources to sustain themselves. So we know that pollinators, especially bees, need both pollen and nectar to bring back to their hive and feed their young, right, for their brood development. So they collect pollen and bring it back to their hive, and that's in they're intentionally collecting and bringing it back. They've got specialized structures on them to collect that pollen. But I would say most of the important beneficial insects on farms that are predators and parasitoids of crop pests also utilize pollen and nectar, especially during time periods when when there aren't prey available. So predators, we're familiar with lacewings and ladybugs, but during time periods, especially early season, when there's not a lot of prey available, it's really important to have pollen resources in the environment around farms to help those beneficial insects stay around. And so these hedgerows like this help provide that important pollen for our predators early on in the season when there's not a lot of prey. Those populations of aphids and everything haven't built up. And so it's important to have that food resource for those predator insects. A lot of the wasp parasitoids, so there's wasps that parasitize are some of our pests, and which means that they lay eggs within the pest bodies, and then they develop their young inside the pests. And many caterpillars and aphids we might be familiar with are parasitized in this way. And I would say that most insects have a parasitoid associated with them, a wasp parasitoid or a fly parasitoid. And that's just the way it is. There's always someone that's going to eat the other or kill the other insect. And as long as there's a niche there, they're going to be there. But they often, the adult parasitoids, they utilize nectar, especially in some pollen, to get the energy to fly around, and so and to be able to develop young. And so the more nectar and pollen are available, these insects can be more productive. So be able to produce more eggs and be able to parasitize more crop pests out there, and with providing some of these floral resources. So flowers are super important, but that's not the only thing that these kind of habitats provide. Also overwintering habitats. So a lot of both our native bees and our predator and parasitoid insects need a place to overwinter, and in many cases that's looking for areas with mulch or leaf duff that they can overwinter underneath, insulated areas that won't get cold and are well drained. So even just like those wood chips that we put down provide a habitat for overwintering. But in addition, a lot of the native grasses that we're planting today provide those kind of spaces in between their stems. As they grow up, they'll have bunches of stems close together, and those areas are well drained. They don't get soggy, and they're insulated. So a lot of the beneficial insects can overwinter in those spaces, as well as bumblebees and some of other native ground-dwelling bees. There's also a number of plants that provide overwintering or nesting spaces within their stems, and those are typically hollow or pithy stemmed plants. So some examples are elderberry or salmonberry, ninebark. There's more than that, but there's a few examples there. But it's not just some of the woody plants. There's also some of the herbaceous plants, surprisingly, can provide these kind of nesting, stem nesting areas, like goldenrod and yarrow provide these spaces, and Douglas aster. Those are some of the ones that I'm thinking of right now. And so having those kind of plants available is also important for both bee overwintering that some bees nest in stems, and then there's also some other insects that can utilize those spaces to
I'm
help
just going to
overwinter.
insert that's why this newer wisdom that if you don't clean up in the fall and you save it till later, it's better for pollinators. Many of us gardeners, you know, it's like finally there's time and we want to clean up, but if we can leave it, we're leaving pollinator.
Yeah,
habitat.
I mean, that brings to mind another type of habitat that's not necessarily involving the plants, but brush piles can and rock piles can provide spaces for overwintering and nesting for pollinators. It's those spaces in and amongst the branches, especially if you have a brush pile and then you put leaves on top of it. You've got leaves and you've got these spaces in there, and especially bumblebees like those kind of spaces because they can build their nests in spaces that have like a void of like a fist-sized void or softball-sized air space, and so even brush piles can provide those kind of nesting spaces, also overwintering spaces. So leaving a little bit of messiness around the farm is especially important. And even you want to chop down your Himalayan blackberry, even just leaving the canes out over winter will allow spaces for them to overwinter in there, and perhaps leaving them through the season if you want to will provide nesting spaces as well.
Is that kind of what No Mow May is about?